I found them in the trash, naked, trembling, forgotten. Back then, I was a nobody. Now the whole country knows our names. Look how 2 cries from the darkness brought me back to the light. Subscribe and write which city you're watching from. It was the rain that woke me, not the usual whispering kind that soothed you to sleep, but a hard, sharp downpour that punched the tin roof above my head and sent rivulets down the broken concrete walls of the overpass. I had long learned to listen to rain, its rhythm, its moods, its warnings. That morning it told me to move. Something about it was different. The damp had already crept through the seams of my coat. I sat up slowly, bones stiff from another night on the cold ground. Around me, my makeshift camp lay half-flooded, a soggy pile of cardboard, plastic sheeting, and memories no one wanted. A city bus roared past above, unseen but thunderous, sending vibrations down the steel pillars that held up the bridge I called home. I could have stayed curled up, as I had so many mornings before, but something tugged at me, a sound, maybe, that didn't belong. Not the rain, not the traffic, something small, fragile. I held my breath. There it was again, a whimper, barely audible over the storm, but it cut through me like a blade. I rose, every joint protesting, and followed the sound past a stack of pallets and a rusted grocery cart I used as a table. The dumpster was there, same as always. Old green metal with graffiti scrawled across it, its lid askew from careless dumping. The cry came again, clearer now. I pulled back the lid and froze. 2 tiny figures, wrapped in nothing but damp newspaper and a torn t-shirt, were curled together in the corner of the bin. Their skin was red and raw from the cold. One of them opened his mouth and let out a cry so hoarse it barely registered as human. The other blinked up at me, wide-eyed and silent. I didn't think, I just moved. My coat came off and wrapped around them, trembling hands lifting them one at a time and holding them close to my chest. They were so small, so light, so warm, and yet so terrifyingly cold. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had left them here, in the trash, like they were nothing, not even a goodbye, just left to die. I carried them back under the overpass, clutching them like they were made of glass. The rain didn't let up, but I didn't care. I settled them inside my shelter, huddled around them, trying to use my body heat, my hands, my voice, anything I had to keep them alive. I had nothing to offer but myself, but in that moment it felt like it had to be enough. I don't remember how long I sat there whispering to them. Hours, maybe. The crying quieted to soft whimpers, then shallow breaths. I found an old towel I used as a blanket, wrapped it around them as best I could. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, from cold, from fear, from the sudden, unrelenting weight of what I was now responsible for. I named them, the one who cried. I called him Justice, because that's what he deserved, though the world had given him none. The quiet one, I called her Hope, because that's what she gave me, just by surviving, just by breathing. I had been under this bridge for years, invisible to most, a ghost wandering a world that had long forgotten me. But in that moment, as those tiny chests rose and fell beside me, I felt more alive than I had in decades. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was needed. And that changed everything. The days that followed were a blur of instinct and desperation. I scavenged what I could. Rags for diapers, broken toys from alleys, anything soft enough to wrap around them. I kept them close, always. When I left to find food, I hid them beneath layers of blankets, praying no one would notice. Or worse, take them. There was a woman who used to bring sandwiches to the soup line near the park. Miss Evelyn, she had kind eyes and didn't flinch when I spoke. I started showing up more, not for myself, but to stash away food I could sneak back to the kids. Applesauce, crackers, the crusts of sandwiches, anything. She asked once why I was taking more than usual. I lied, told her I had a stomach ulcer. She didn't press. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't want to know. At night, I sang to them, songs I barely remembered from my own childhood, gospel hymns, lullabies, blues riffs my father played on his harmonica. I'd forgotten the words long ago, but the tune stayed in my bones. They listened, those babies. They always listened. One night, the rain came again, harder than before. The tarp over our heads split down the middle, sending water pouring into our shelter. I panicked. I wrapped them up in plastic bags, placed them in the cleanest laundry basket I owned, and held it over my head while I crouched beneath it all. I was soaked to the bone, teeth chattering, but they stayed dry. I sat there all night like that, holding them above the flood. And that's when it hit me. I'd die for them, not out of obligation, not even out of love, though I loved them more than life, but because in some twisted, holy way, they had become me, my redemption, my reason, my voice in the silence. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't know how long I could keep them safe, but I knew one thing, with the kind of certainty you only get after you've lost everything else. I wasn't letting them go. Not now. Not ever. Not while I still had breath. Raising children was never something I thought I'd do again. Or ever, really. When you live under a bridge long enough, the world stops expecting anything from you. And you, in turn, stop expecting anything back. But with justice and hope, everything changed. They were so tiny at first, fragile like glass you could break just by looking too long. But they grew. Not quickly and not easily, but they grew. The first few months were the hardest. Their cries pierced the night and echoed under the concrete like thunder. I learned their rhythms. When they needed to eat, when they needed warmth, when they just needed to be held. I became everything for them. Father, mother, protector, provider, even teacher. Though Lord knows I wasn't qualified for any of it. But I had something most folks didn't. The kind of grit that's carved out by years of cold pavement and empty pockets. I didn't know much, but I knew how to survive, and I taught them that by breathing for them when they were too weak to cry. I bartered with the little I had. Some days I'd find half-broken toys in the trash near the nicer parts of the city, a teddy bear with one eye, a baby doll missing its legs. I'd clean them up, tell stories about where they came from. I made up entire worlds for them, because I wanted them to feel like they had something special, even if everything else was borrowed or broken. Some folks in the area started noticing. Not the police. I was careful about them. But people like Miss Evelyn, the woman with the sandwiches. One day she asked if I had someone with me. I hesitated, lied again, said I'd found a stray dog that needed feeding. She laughed and said, "Well, you're a better man than most." I think part of her knew. She started bringing baby formula in unmarked brown bags, saying she accidentally picked up the wrong groceries. I never thanked her with words. Didn't need to. She saw it in the way my hands trembled when I reached for the bag. Winters were hell. The bridge turned into a freezer, the kind that steals the breath out your lungs. I'd wrap the babies in whatever I could. Rags, towels, even newspaper if I had nothing else. There were nights when I stayed awake the whole time, just to make sure they kept breathing. Sometimes I'd press my ear to their chest to hear the beat, slow and steady like a prayer. I kept a small fire in an old paint bucket when I could. The smoke clung to everything, our clothes, our hair, our lungs. But it kept the frostbite at bay, and for that I was grateful. We smelled like smoke and survival, and I started thinking of that scent as our own kind of perfume. One that meant we'd made it through another night. Hope started speaking first, just a few words at a time. Dada came quickly. Cold came next. Then rain. She always pointed up when she said it. Justice took longer. He was quieter, more watchful. But when he did speak, it was full sentences. "Don't leave," he said once, when I stepped out to search for food. "Promise me." I told him I'd always come back. I meant it. We had birthdays. Not the kind with cake or candles, but I made up songs, drew little stars on cardboard, told them how special they were. I'd point to the sky, even when it was overcast, and say, "See those stars up there? You're brighter." They believed me. And maybe in that space beneath the overpass they were. When they were about 3 or 4, the questions began. Why don't we have a house? Why do people look away when they see us? Are we bad? Those ones hurt. I told them the truth, or at least part of it, that some people forget how to care and others never learned. But that didn't mean they weren't worthy of love. I taught them letters using cardboard scraps and charcoal. We'd write their names over and over. I turned the walls of the overpass into our blackboard. Justice, I'd say, pointing to each letter. Hope. They beamed every time they spelled them out. It was more than just names. It was who they were becoming. The world didn't make it easy. One night, a group of teenagers came down to the bridge, laughing and throwing beer bottles. They called me names, threatened to burn the place down. I stood between them and the children with a rusted pipe in my hand. They backed off eventually, but my hands shook for hours after. That night, Justice asked me, "Are we safe here?" I couldn't lie. I just held him close and said, "As long as I'm breathing, no one's going to touch you." I wish that had been enough. There were kind days, too. A woman left a bag of winter clothes on a nearby bench without saying a word. Another time, a man in a delivery uniform dropped a whole box of expired baby food and said, "Wrong address," before walking away without looking back. These people, they didn't want thanks. Maybe they just wanted to do one good thing in a world that so often forgot how. I watched the twins grow. Their faces filled out. Their legs got stronger. They played under the overpass, built castles from milk crates and sticks, laughed in the kind of way that echoed like bells through the concrete. I lived for that sound. Sometimes I dream of taking them away, of finding some place far from the city where no one would stare or whisper or ask questions, a place with trees and a sky that wasn't split by overpasses. But dreams cost hope, and hope was something I had to ration carefully. I couldn't afford to believe in what I couldn't build with my own two hands. Still, I started saving. Little by little, coins found on the sidewalk, change from kind strangers. I kept it in a tin can buried under the gravel. For them. I didn't know what it would buy. Maybe a night in a motel, maybe shoes that didn't have holes. But I saved like a man possessed. Then one day, it happened. Hope got sick. She'd been coughing for days, but I thought it was just the cold. Then came the fever. Her little body shook with chills, and no matter how many blankets I piled on her, she wouldn't stop sweating. Her lips turned blue. I panicked. Justice clung to my leg, crying. I wrapped her up and ran. To the church down the street, to the mission shelter, to anyone who would listen. I didn't care anymore if they knew where we lived. I didn't care about hiding. A nurse saw us and took her without asking questions. They kept her overnight, gave her antibiotics, warm fluids, clean sheets. They wouldn't let me stay, but they let Justice sit with her. He held her hand the whole time. I slept outside the hospital that night, in the alley, in the rain, and for once, I didn't feel homeless. I felt like a father. They let us go the next morning, told me she'd be okay if I kept her warm and fed. I nodded, holding back tears. The nurse handed me a blanket and whispered, "You're doing better than most." That day I knew I couldn't keep them under the bridge forever. It was time to begin again, time to find a way out. But how do you climb out of a world that was built to trap you? That question would haunt me for months to come. There comes a moment when necessity stops whispering and starts screaming. For me, it came one humid morning when I opened my eyes and saw the sky bleeding through a hole in our tarp. I saw Justice and Hope still curled up beside me, their faces streaked with soot and sleep, and I knew, not suspected, not feared, but knew that I couldn't let this continue. That hospital visit had lit a fire in me, not just of fear, but of determination. They had almost slipped through my fingers, and I hadn't even realized how close I had come to losing everything I had in the world. They were getting older, their questions sharper, their wonder turning to worry. I could not keep them beneath concrete and tin and call it love. But love doesn't fill forms. Love doesn't speak the language of bureaucracy, and I knew it would not be enough for what came next. They didn't have names, not real ones, not on paper. No birth certificates, no social security numbers, no proof that they had ever been born. And as far as the world was concerned, they were nobody. And if I didn't fix that, they'd stay that way forever. I spent 2 days just walking, Not looking for food, not gathering cans, but just walking, thinking. How do you give an identity to two children that were thrown away like garbage? How do you tell the system, the very one that forgot you, to recognize what it refused to see? I had no answers, but I knew I needed help. Real help. The idea came from a man named Walter. He was an old vet who'd lost a leg in Iraq, and most of his hope somewhere between the hospital and the shelter system. We crossed paths sometimes near the train tracks. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was usually something worth hearing. "You need papers?" he said one day, squinting at me under his wide-brimmed hat. "There's a woman over at St. Joseph's, Sister Teresa. She deals with ghosts like us." I didn't ask what that meant. I just nodded and set out for the church. St. Joseph's stood on a corner where the streets turned quiet. Its bricks were old, red with soot and age, but the doors were always open, and the bell still rang every Sunday. I hadn't been inside a church in years, not since the last time I felt worthy of stepping into one. But I stepped inside anyway. The inside smelled like old wood, melted wax, and something like memory. There were pews, rows of them, empty that afternoon, except for one elderly woman praying with her face in her hands. And near the altar stood a small figure in a plain gray sweater and long skirt, white hair tucked into a modest bun. She looked up when I entered, her eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "Sister Teresa?" I asked. She smiled. "That's me." "What do you need, son?" I stood frozen. The words wouldn't come. They felt too big, too heavy. "I need to make two children visible," I said finally. "They've been invisible too long." I told her the story, not all of it, not yet, but enough. Her face didn't flinch, not once. She didn't cry or gasp or give me the look most people give when they realize just how far someone can fall. She just listened. When I finished, she said, "Bring them." So I did. I washed them first, found clean clothes in the back of the shelter bin. I made them hold hands and promised them it was okay to be nervous. I brought them to the church the next morning. Sister Teresa greeted them like they were royalty. She had books ready, crayons, warm biscuits. She didn't ask questions they couldn't answer. She made them laugh, and in return they gave her their trust. Over the next weeks, she became more than just a nun. She became our lifeline. She introduced us to a social worker named Renee, a woman in her 40s who wore her compassion like armor. She asked questions, hard ones. Where were they born? Who were their parents? What names had I given them? I answered everyone as best I could, truth wrapped in layers of guesswork and faith. "Justice and Hope," I said. "Those are their names." Renee nodded, writing it down. Then came the paperwork, so much of it. Birth affidavits, medical reports, statements, interviews. I told my story again and again. Each time I told it, I felt like I was putting skin back on bones, like I was shaping the skeleton of something real, a family. I gave them my name, George Elijah Harris, a name I hadn't spoken in years. It felt strange on my tongue, like trying on clothes you thought you'd outgrown. But it fit, and I gave it to them. Justice Elijah Harris, Hope Elaine Harris. Names for the forgotten. It took months of signatures, background checks, court visits. But slowly, the system began to see them. Files opened, records created. They got health insurance. They were enrolled in a small preschool run by the church. They had backpacks with their names stitched in bright blue thread. And one day they called me Dad. Not Dada, not old man, not George, just Dad. I cried the first time I heard it. I started doing odd jobs for the church, fixing broken pews, sweeping the steps, repainting the nursery room. They couldn't pay me much, but they gave us a room, a real one, in the back of the building. It wasn't fancy, but it had a bed, a window, and a door that locked. For the first time in years, we slept without the sound of traffic above us. But the past doesn't let go easy. One afternoon, as I walked the kids home from the park, a police cruiser rolled up beside us. 2 officers stepped out. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I had done everything right. I had filled every form, followed every rule. But still, fear gripped me. They asked for my ID. I gave it. They asked about the children. I showed the paperwork. Still, they looked at me like I didn't belong. "You sure you're not holding them against their will?" one officer said, half smiling. Justice stepped forward. "This is my dad." And just like that, the moment passed. But I didn't forget it. The world still saw the bridge in me, the trash, the dirt, the cardboard. But the kids, they saw something else. That night, Hope drew a picture. It was us, the three of us, holding hands in front of the church. Above us, she wrote, "Family." No matter what came next, I knew I had done something right. But there was one thing left unfinished. The story of where they came from. Who left them? Why? I had buried that question deep, but it was time to bring it to light. Because no one should grow up without knowing why they were left behind. And I owed it to them to find out. Even if it meant walking back into the shadows I had fought so hard to escape. The closer I came to the truth, the more silence fought me. It wrapped itself around everything: records, names, stories told in half-breaths and quick glances. I thought getting justice and Hope legal identities was the hard part, but that was just the beginning. I didn't want them to grow up believing they were born in a void. They had roots, and roots matter. Even if those roots were twisted and buried in rot, they were still theirs. I began where I found them, at the overpass. I walked that stretch of road again and again, taking in every forgotten corner of it like it might whisper something I'd missed. I spoke to every vendor, every waste collector, every old man who loitered near the dumpsters. Most just shook their heads. A few offered sympathy. One woman remembered a car parked near the dumpster that night. "White sedan," she said, squinting as if seeing it again. "Didn't belong here. It was too clean." That was all I had to go on. I brought the detail to Sister Teresa. She suggested checking with a nearby gas station whose camera might have caught footage that night. I laughed. That had been over 4 years ago. Who would still have those tapes? But I went anyway. The man behind the counter was young, maybe 20, with dreadlocks and a voice full of suspicion. He didn't want to talk to someone like me. I get it. But then I showed him a photo of the kids, the one Sister Teresa had printed for me, where Justice and Hope stood hand in hand in their preschool uniforms. His face softened. He didn't have the tapes, of course, but he remembered someone who used to hang around, a guy named Leo who collected scrap and helped out at the station sometimes. "He saw everything," the kid said. "He don't talk much, but he knows things." I found Leo sleeping under a stairwell near the bus depot. I offered him coffee, and he took it like it was gold. I asked him if he remembered a white sedan near the overpass years back. He stared at me, blinking through layers of confusion, then clarity. "Yeah," he muttered. "Girl drove it. Young, blonde, scared. She had a box, not big, like a laundry hamper. Kept looking around. I thought she was dumping puppies. But they cried like babies." My blood turned to ice. I asked him if he remembered anything else. A license plate, a direction. He shrugged. She was crying, like she hated what she was doing. But she still did it. I thanked him, gave him my only 20, walked away with shaking hands. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Sister Teresa to pull a few strings. A friend of hers worked in a legal aid office with ties to child services. They knew of a case, years back, where a girl had given birth in secret and the babies had disappeared. The police never charged anyone. No bodies, no leads. The girl, Charlotte, had gone back to her wealthy parents and vanished from the radar. It had been a scandal in their gated community, but like most things involving money, it got swept away. I sat for hours staring at the name. Charlotte Whitmore, daughter of Ronald and Evelyn Whitmore. Graduated with honors. Interned for a senator. Married now, with another child. She had left justice and hope in the trash, and now she lived in a mansion with a white fence and a golden retriever. I didn't know what I wanted. Revenge? Answers? Closure? I just knew I couldn't keep it from the kids. I told Sister Teresa first. She listened quietly, then said something I didn't expect. She may have been desperate, terrified, doesn't make it right. But maybe there's something worth salvaging. I didn't want to salvage anything, but I also knew my anger couldn't be the kids' inheritance. So I did the unthinkable. I wrote Charlotte a letter. I didn't threaten her. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth, that her children were alive, that they were thriving, that the man who found them had given them names and shelter and love, that they had a future. And if she wanted to see them, just see them, she could. I gave her a number. Weeks passed. Nothing came. Then one rainy afternoon, the phone at the church rang. It was her. Her voice trembled. She asked if I was the man from the letter. Yes, I said, steady as stone. She asked if the children were safe. Yes. She asked if they were angry. No, they don't know who you are. Not yet. Silence. Then, may I meet them? It took every piece of me to say yes. The meeting took place in the church garden, under the statue of St. Francis. Justice and Hope wore their Sunday best. They didn't know the truth, only that a kind lady wanted to meet them. Charlotte arrived in a modest dress, hair tied back, no makeup, no show, just her. She knelt when she saw them, and cried. They didn't understand her tears. Hope hugged her without knowing why. Justice stood back, watching with eyes too wise for his age. Later, I sat with Charlotte in the back pew. She told me everything, about the pregnancy, the fear, her parents' threats, the night she drove to the bridge, crying the whole way, how she sat with them for 2 hours before finally leaving. I thought I was saving them from me, she whispered, but I gave them to you. She asked if she could be part of their lives. I didn't answer then. I still don't know if I will. But that night, as I tucked them into bed, Hope said, "That lady smelled like the rain." I didn't correct her. The next day, I was called to the mayor's office. Apparently, someone had heard about my story. The man who found babies in a dumpster and raised them with love. The church had told it quietly, and someone picked it up. They offered to do a piece on us, a feature. A story of redemption, they said. I said no at first, but then I thought, maybe this wasn't just my story. Maybe it belonged to Justice and Hope, too. Maybe the world needed to know what people throw away and what others choose to save. So I told them. The news spread. People called me a hero, a saint, a miracle. But I'm just a man who didn't walk past the crying, a man who stayed. Now we have a small apartment near the school. I fix things, wash dishes, work at a food pantry. I make enough to keep the lights on. Justice wants to be a writer. Hope wants to sing. And I sit by the window sometimes watching them. Not everyone gets a second chance. But sometimes the people the world forgets become the ones who change it. And that's enough for me. Always has been. Always will be. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Watch the next video and check out others on the channel. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.